buddy? Hey YouTube, welcome back to Locked In Anglers. Today we're going to break down the two baits that you need to be throwing this spawn and this post spawn. For us, all of our big fish this time of year are coming on topwater. Topwater is just the best way to get those aggressive or really defensive fish to show themselves and commit to a bait that they might not commit to otherwise. So we really look at the topwater bite in two different categories. One, the aggressive one, and two, the more subtle or finickier bite. You can bet that the number one bait that we're throwing for those aggressive fish, both largemouth and smallmouth, is a spook. A spook is a bait that it lets you cover a ton of water. It has a really neat presentation. It lets you to slow down, speed up, and just really create a large disturbance on the water and draw a reaction strike from any type of fish. So for spooks, there's a handful of different baits on the market that are really good. So I'm going to try to simplify it to what we use on tournament day and when we're out fun fishing, because we've really narrowed down the approach to just a handful of spooks. For us, for smallmouth and largemouth, we really like to throw the River to Sea Rover. It has a really loud, higher sound, and then the Reaction Innovation Vixen, which is a little bit of a deeper sound, kind of like a one knocker. Both of those baits, they have very different sounds, and you'll just have days where they're just eating one and they won't eat the other, and the next day it'll be the complete opposite. So for us, it's really important for us to try both of them, have them both tied on, or at least give both of them a fair shot. If they're not in that crazy aggressive mood, that's when we start to change pretty quickly to either a smaller presentation with like the Lucky Craft Sammy, smaller bait, much quieter, and it really mimics a small, subtle approach in the water. You can throw it with low wind, and the interesting thing with the bait is as it's walking across the surface, when you kill it, it stops and sits straight up, and it'll just position itself straight up and down, and the amount of times that you'll just have a fish that comes up and just pulls it under, it's crazy. It's just a bait that when the topwater bite's not going or the spook bite's not going, they'll always find a way to eat the Sammy. The other one that we use really religiously is the 6th Sense Dogma. It's a bit of a newer spook, and it has a really unique action. It walks so incredibly tightly that you can darn near walk it in place. And we actually use it a lot for a bed bait and for a bait to target fry garters. When the fish are on a very specific location, the bait, being able to keep the bait in the strike zone for the longest period of time gives us a ton of confidence to be able to target those fish really effectively. And then, I mean, it's hard to talk about spooks without talking about the original, the Zara Super Spook or the Heddon Super Spook. I mean, this bait just has the low, classic spook sound, ton of great colors, just really wide walking action, and it's a great bait that just catches fish anywhere you go in the country. I don't know how many, I don't know, with this specific color as well, I don't know how many times I see this on the boats of the Elite, the guys on the Elite series, local guys. It's just a fantastic bait that catches them everywhere. But the one that's really, there's one unique spook that we've really started to use more and more, and I think if there's a topwater bite, either Travis or I have it tied on just about every tournament, and that is the Shower Blows. Megabass Shower Blows is a really interesting spook. Same profile, same size as a lot of the other spooks that we're throwing, but this one has a cupped lip. So it allows you to walk the bait very tightly, but it also throws water out a bit like a popper. And it allows you to elicit a reaction strike that's pretty crazy relative to the other baits, because it's not a bait that works every day. It's a unique sound, it's a unique action, but when the Shower Blows bite is going, it is addicting. They hit the living daylights out of it. I've had them knock this Shower Blows 2 feet in the air. A smallmouth will come up with its mouth closed and just punch the bait square out of the air. It's a really fun bait. It's a really great presentation, and it's one that you have to have on your deck this year if you're trying to target big smallmouth, big largemouth, because that bait just absolutely gets bit. And if we want to talk about big fish, there's two other baits that we use a good deal if we're really trying to get our kicker, or we're on a body of water that has a really big bait fish like gizzard shad, some American shad, large perch or kokanee, and it's the big spook. Two main ones in particular. This is the Strike King Big Dog, super loud bait, really big wobble, just puts off a ton of water, and it just gets bit by your most aggressive fish, and more often than not they are really big ones. Like any big topwater, it's really hard to keep them pinned, so you just got to get those fish in the boat as fast as possible. Try not to let them jump, and just try to go from hook set to in the net as fast as possible. And then the other one that's a pretty unique bait that's it's been a pretty coveted bait for years. There's a wood version of it, the original silent, and then there's now a plastic version of the black dog Lunker punker. And it is a massive bait. It is huge. It's bigger than my hand. Puts off a ton of sound, and it just flat out gets bit by big ones. So you don't catch a ton of fish on them, but if you're fishing a tournament and it's a topwater bite, you better have a big topwater on, because you're gonna miss out on the chance to catch a really big 4, 5, 6 pound smallmouth if you're not throwing that monster topwater bait and getting that big one to just try to optimize its metabolism and try to knock out the biggest bait that hits the water in front of it that day. So when the spook bite's not working, there's still other options. For us, we love to throw a popper. If the spook bite's not going and we have to slow down, the popper is something we have a ton of confidence in. We've caught a ton of big largemouth and smallmouth on, and it's a really simple presentation. And there's not really that many that we throw. We keep it really simple with our poppers. If it's a bite that they're still targeting some rather large sized fish, we're going to go to the Megabass PopMax. It's about 2/3 the size of a spook, but it's a really great topwater. It's heavy enough. It's about 5/8 ounces, so you can really chuck it far. You can walk it, so you can kind of get a subtle version of a spook action out of it, and then you can also chug it back to the boat. And you use that over laydowns or some sort of disruption in current or in overhead cover, and between the Megabass and its very similar counterpart, the Bubble Pop from Rover to Sea, these baits just flat out get bit by big largemouth and big smallmouth. And if it's a really finessey bite, we'll go down to your smaller size poppers. And for the smaller size, there's only two that we throw. We throw the Don Lovino popper. It's a bit of a rare popper, has a really unique sound to it. But this popper just flat out gets bit across the country. And then one that we hold a bit secret, but so what we're excited to tell you guys about it is the Damiki D-Pop. This is a pretty small popper, especially relative to the Megabass. It's about an inch shorter than it. But what's really unique about it is it's very quiet. It's a very quiet popper. It is a really subtle action, but it allows you to walk the bait in place with darn near no rattle. And when those fish are finicky, they're guarding fry, or they're not in a really large feeding mood, that bait from the Delta, the California Delta, to up in Washington, to out in Kentucky, or anywhere in between, that bait just gets bit. And it's one of our biggest confidence baits when we want to be sure that the topwater bite is just not going. If they don't eat that D-Pop, that topwater bite is just flat out not going. For all of our topwaters though, we have a ton of confidence in them, and we will always be throwing them on tournament day, just because a topwater is it's the best way that you can catch a really big fish. You're not going to catch a ton of them, but your big fish are more susceptible to a topwater bait than just about any other type of bait out there. Now, I know we've all had those times where you're having big fish blow up on the topwater and they just can't seem to connect with it. And so for us, anytime we have a topwater bait that we're throwing, we're also always going to have a follow-up finesse presentation to follow up a fish that might miss our topwater. For us, we really stick with 3 main types of presentations. For one, a good old-fashioned 4-inch Senko. Fantastic bait to catch those fish that just want to commit but couldn't get the bait all the way. And it's just a super subtle approach that you can throw right back in there and usually get that fish that just showed itself and just happened to miss the treble hooks. The other one that's pretty unique that we really, really like is a Fluke or a Yamamoto D-Shad. These 2 baits, they allow you to basically mimic what a topwater does on top of the water, especially if it's like a spook bite where the fish are pretty active in chasing. Working a fluke, having it dart around just below the surface can be a great finesse presentation to get those fish that just missed your big topwater to actually commit. The D-Shad's a great one if you want to just throw it out there and let it sink and kind of spiral down, as it's a bit more of a heavy version of a fluke. It's kind of a hybrid between a fluke and a Senko. Or if you want to just throw a fluke out there, pop it back to the boat and try to get that reaction bite on a subsurface presentation, the Zoom Super Fluke is a fantastic way to do that. For gear that we're throwing this on, for both of these, we're throwing them on a 7 to 7.2 medium action rod. It's small treble hooks, so we don't want to overhorse the bait. Obviously, when we're going to the bigger size topwaters, we're stepping up to like a 7.2 to 7.4 medium heavy to heavy action rod, just so we don't break the rod, because the baits are 1 to 1.5 ounces. But tried and true for all of these, all the normal size spooks and the poppers, we're throwing 6'10" to 7 foot medium action rod, medium power, moderate action rods that really load up on the fish and just allow you to absorb all their head shakes with the really small treble hooks. For all these, we're also throwing them on straight braid. 30-pound braid is the one that we have the most confidence in, because it allows you to get a little bit extra casting distance over 50 to 60-pound braid, which is what we'd be using for a frog. But it's just a really reliable size of braid. It doesn't dig in as much. It's really smooth on the bait casters, so when the fish are pulling really close to the boat, the braid slides out of the reel really nicely and allows you to handle and land those fish a lot better. One thing that you will notice, one of the big modifications that we make, especially as we get later and later into the year, as more and more people are throwing topwaters, is we start replacing our back hooks with feathered trebles. Really unique. It's a really unique profile when you have the feathered treble on there, because it just looks a little bit different than that topwater that they've seen 312 times over the course of the summer. And we're a really strong proponent that it just gets you a couple extra bites when fish may see that one subtlety that they just haven't seen before, and they just commit. It's just like using a red hook on a jerk bait. It gives them something to target, gives them something a little bit different, and it can trigger those fish when they just have that split second when they decide to go or no go. And the feathered treble is something that we feel really passionate about, and especially for a bait like a popper where they have a lot of time to look at it, as it's not moving very fast. You'll notice every single one of our poppers has a feather on it, and we won't throw it without it, and it's just something that we know gets us more bites on tournament day. I mean, that really wraps it up for topwaters. I mean, if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them down in the comments. We keep it really simple. We have a handful of baits that we use, but overarchingly, if it's the spawn, post-spawn, summer or fall, you'll never not see a topwater on our deck. And we're relying on them on every single time we go out to catch a big fish for us on tournament day. So if you guys don't have them on, I'd recommend putting on a popper, putting on a spook, and just chucking it out there and getting some confidence in it, because you will have a blast. Thanks for sticking along with us, and we'll catch you in the next one. Tight lines.